Hello, I'm Stefanie Dekker, and welcome to the stream. Now, most of us are spending a lot of time online, but have you ever thought about who controls your online experience? Is it the government of the country that you're in? Is it the company that created the app that you're using? How much control do you have, if any? Well, let's start with the stream's Jassim Khanji, who explores why digital sovereignty has become such a dominant conversation online.
Your social media feed, right here, has become a battleground for global powers. I'm at the Jazeera Forum, where one of the main themes has been how advancing technologies have changed the balance of global power.
فيما يخص البنية التحتية سواء من امتلاك السيرفرز وامتلاك الرقائق إلى أننا مازال متأخرين بزاف.
We spend so much of our time online, and until now, it's been a handful of tech bros, mostly in California, that have control of your feeds, your data, and a whole bunch of other information that you give them when you use their apps. But in recent years, city and national governments and supranational bodies like the African and European unions have identified this as a major problem. They've rolled out new legislation and new infrastructure to take control of the data of their populations and assert their digital sovereignty. But is trading corporate control for government control good for us? And is there more that we can do to have more of a say in what happens to our own data in the digital sphere?
Well, more control certainly sounds nice, but how realistic is that? How much control do you feel you have over your digital footprint? Do you read privacy policies or do you just click accept? It's complex, it's important, and it affects all of us. Today, we're talking about the right to our data. And to discuss all of this, we are joined by Alejandro Mayoral Banos, co-executive director of Access Now, which defends the digital rights of people and communities worldwide. He's in Toronto, and we have Arthur Gwagwa joining us from Harare in Zimbabwe. He is an expert on digital ethics and the philosophy of technology, and he is currently advising UNESCO. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on the stream. Alejandro, I will start with you. As we go more and more digital, this is a crucial conversation, isn't it? It's a complex conversation. To simplify it, what is digital sovereignty?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Steph, for having me. I think the concept of digital sovereignty is really complex, and the conversation around it is really has several layers. First of all, what do we mean with digital? Are we meaning the hardware? Are we meaning the software? Or are we meaning the data, right? So it entails different layers of infrastructure. And on the other part, the sovereignty piece. Sovereignty piece is commonly linked to national states, to, a specific country to have control of their territory and everything within that territory. However, when we are talking about digital sovereignty, that concept together means different things for different stakeholders. We have the concept of digital sovereignty for national states, as we heard in the introduction, how national states are controlling all these different layers of infrastructure. But also we have a different understanding for civil society and how actually that concept changes because it's more about having autonomy. And just a third layer is with indigenous communities, because indigenous communities has a completely different meaning of what it means to have control of their digital infrastructure.
Because there is, of course, a gap, isn't there, when it comes to digital access globally. Arthur, you're in Zimbabwe. Who controls much of the infrastructure and the data out there? The internet's critical infrastructure. It seems to be in the hands of very few individuals, doesn't it? And does it affect people more who have more access to the internet, or is it something that will be a global issue at some point?
Currently, I think, Zimbabwe is a country that is a representative of, many countries in terms of, repression and digital authoritarianism. So most of our data is currently controlled by the political elite. And part of it in the past decade is controlled by, countries like China, because our countries are entering into agreements with, the global superpowers, trading our data for profit. What countries like China end up doing is to give the governments, our governments, the technical abilities to control more and more of our data and our sovereignty.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like, it is complicated because it's our data, right, on an individual level. And then you also have the idea of the state being able to control, or you would think, the data of its people. So it's not just about you and I not having control over our data, or at least it's very complicated. It even goes as far as countries sometimes not having full control of their citizens' data. Listen to this.
Every important institution in the Netherlands is completely dependent on Microsoft and Amazon. It's all of our parliaments, our municipalities, our traditional media, schools, universities, it's our health insurances, it's our hospitals. Just imagine if, just for 1 hour, they would no longer have access to these American services. The country would, be in total chaos. If they cut, Microsoft and Amazon, this country is going. It's not far-fetched because it already happens in a small way when the United States sanctioned the ICC. So Microsoft followed up on these sanctions and locked the prosecutor of the ICC out of his email, and he was just no longer able to do his job.
Alejandro, I saw you nodding. Simplify this for us. So countries do not always have full control of their data, of their citizens' data, because it is connected to a server that is controlled somewhere by someone else. How does it work?
Yes, and I think here is the complexity of this conversation. On one hand, you have authoritarian governments. I was explaining before, like China, but we have many other examples across the world. On the other hand, you have multinational corporations that are having control of the infrastructure. So in either of the extremes, we are not having, as citizens, we don't have control of our own data and our infrastructure. And this is a lot of the idea that is coming from civil society when we are talking about digital sovereignty, how we have control of our data and actually the cultural meaning of that data. And this is a lot of what we are actually doing from the civil society perspective, how we can get out of the narrative between the states and the corporations and having full control and autonomy of this infrastructure and the different layers that this entails.
So Arthur, it seems to be an issue that boils down to the same thing, whether it's countries that are sort of controlling your data that isn't transparent, or your data is going outside of countries' borders to somewhere else. We as individuals don't seem to have a very tight grasp on it. We have no control over where it goes.
Yes, you are right. What is happening, particularly in Africa, is that countries peddling, the rhetoric of digital sovereignty, saying, no, we want to be sovereign from the big tech corporations like Google, Facebook, and X. But at the same time, whilst they're condemning those big corporations, they're taking the same data to their friends like China and other countries that Alejandro has spoken about. So at the end of the day, I think we are between a hard place and a rock, whether our data is being siphoned out of the country by the big tech, like Facebook, or by China. But in the case of Africa, most of the data that is going to, in the case of Zimbabwe and other African countries, what is more problematic is the big data set that is data sets that are being sent to countries like China. Because our activities on Facebook and Twitter, we have some measure of control to a certain extent. But what we don't have control over is the data that is going out of the country as a result of the political agreements between our countries and authoritarian regimes.
I see you nodding there, Alejandro. I mean, it is so untransparent, right? How can we even understand? How can we control? And actually, let me just play a clip before I go to you, because it does raise a question. One possible solution is you could ditch your corporate-powered software for an open-source solution, and that's what a number of cities in Europe have been doing. Listen to this.
France's third largest city, Lyon, just voted to quit Microsoft 365. So Lyon will swap Outlook, Teams, and Office for open source tools in a push for basically digital sovereignty. The motion cites that they spend 700,000 euros per year in subscription fees and strategic dependency on a foreign vendor as another reason. So this is awesome news. I'm really excited to see how it works out for the Lyon team, and going from saving a bunch of licensing fees and all that sort of stuff, but also having control over your data. It's, you know, it's a no-brainer to me.
Alejandro, can you break that down for us? What is open source tech, and why would Lyon want to do that?
Well, open source is a complete different aspect, where actually a group of people are gathering for creating something in common, with the idea of the commons, how we can all benefit from this common piece of software. And the idea is there are several rules in order to be considered open source. The idea of this type of digital sovereignty, as I was pointing at the beginning, was actually the idea of autonomy, how we can have control and a possession of our data and of our infrastructure. The idea is that, in this case, a group of citizens in Lyon can have full control of the software and full control of the data that is produced by this software. One of the big challenges of this type of solutions is, first of all, is how to maintain the software and how to adapt the software to the specific needs that are required, in this case, in the city of Lyon. And also, more importantly, the interoperability. One big problem of open source is that sometimes you require, a specific software for, let's say, mail, another piece of software for, the different applications to open documents, to create slideshows, and a different software for your calendar, to manage your calendar. So this problem is called interoperability. And this is one of the big challenges of this type of software.
It's very, sorry to jump in there, but it's very difficult to compete with these big tech companies, right? That have the money, the research behind them, to have a bunch of people who want to do something. It's amazing, yes, but it's difficult to compete with that, right? It's also something about simplicity. Let me segue into another clip that I want to throw to Arthur. The African Union is behind a major infrastructure project to increase connectivity on the continent. Now, this user thinks it could be a game changer for their digital sovereignty.
Africa is building its own internet, and it could change the world. For years, almost every click, message, or video in Africa had to travel through Europe or America before coming back. And that made the internet in Africa slower, more expensive, and kept African data in foreign hands. Now that's changing. The African Union has launched the Continental Internet Exchange, a new digital backbone that keeps African traffic inside Africa. When African nations take control of their internet, it shifts the balance of power worldwide.
Arthur, can you tell me a little bit more about that, if that is something that will make a big change, but at the same time, following up what you were saying earlier, governments can still sell your data to third parties, right? So it still doesn't really help the little man.
Yes. On the one hand, we've got what we call the digital architecture, and then on the other, we have the political architecture. Africa is been known, I think, historically for lacking what we call collective political agency, or the ability for countries to work together. So there's a lot of rhetoric at the African Union level, political rhetoric, which means that I think in as much as, even if we improve our digital architecture, for as long as there is no political will to back that, there's gonna be some problems. Because Africa, unlike the European Union, where countries work together and put positions together in international forum, that is actually different in Africa, where other countries belong to the BRICS, other countries are having agreements with big corporations. For example, Rwanda usually act alone on issues to do with digital governance. So yes, it's a laudable step. It's something that we can praise the African Union for, that it's going to make communication easier, I think much more quicker in terms of our searches. Say I'm doing a search online, it doesn't, the query that I make online is not going to be rerouted through Seattle or Silicon Valley. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. What's problematic in Africa is domination from the governments, the lack of political will by the political elite to work in the interests of their own people. So the internet exchange within Africa might actually facilitate more repression. For example, internet shutdowns. For example, right now, you can circumvent internet shutdowns and other forms of repression because the governments do not have control over the global internet. But once it's localized, it is going to be easy for them to switch us off.
God, it all sounds like very much doom and gloom. Alejandro, I see you wanted to jump in there. Go ahead.
Just 2 points. First, this is actually the dichotomy of digital sovereignty. On one piece, if you allow multinational corporations to enter your country, they are going to take your data and use it outside of the country. But on the other side, if you boost the digital sovereignty piece, you are also increasing the possibilities of authoritarianism and how this can affect, citizens. And this is why, a lot of what happened, for example, with Lyon, is a good example of how citizens can have control of the digital sovereignty. And I think this is how we want to move forward. The second quick aspect that I just want to say is that the internet shutdowns is a great example. We have been working in the Keep It On campaign for over 10 years, and sadly, the internet shutdowns worldwide have been increasing. So this idea of digital sovereignty that has been increasing in many different jurisdictions actually has been increasing also the internet shutdowns, as it was named before.
Arthur, is there awareness among the people? I mean, I'm asking you to summarize a continent, because as you say, the countries are so very different in how they operate. But is there some kind of unity among the people, a growing feeling that we need to do more to try and control our data?
Yes. For example, my colleague Alejandro at Access Now, they're going to be doing RiceCon in Zambia, is it in May, this year? So RiceCon has been doing a lot of, good work in mobilizing civil society worldwide to fight back and to keep the internet on. The campaign is called Keep It On. But what is also needed is to connect, I think, the discourse of digital rights with the offline rights and democracy promotion. I think there's still a chasm. We need to involve more people, more stakeholders in academia, but traditional civil society in order for them to be energized and galvanized to be aware of these issues. But so far, I think Access Now has been doing fantastic work. And then we are also having Pan-African organizations like CIPESA, Paradigm Initiative in Nigeria, and APC in South Africa, Research ICT Africa in South Africa. But what is also happening, AI has been a game changer in the sense that I think most of us who used to work for digital rights are now working on AI ethics. So AI ethics seems to be a soft approach to digital rights, but it also militates against digital rights in the sense that it's more soft and it's more malleable, and governments tend to accept you as an activist if you're working on ethics than if you're working on internet shutdowns and other forms of repression.
It is such a multi-layered and complicated topic. Well, we're going to expand it a little bit. The Stream's Jassim Khanji sat down with Sahar Khamis, an expert on Arab and Muslim media at the University of Maryland, to discuss the inequalities of the internet.
In the early days of the internet, there was this idea that it's not only going to connect people around the world, but it's going to do it in a way that's kind of free and equal. How does that compare to the state of the digital sphere today?
I think that when the internet first was introduced, there was this idea of the big promises of the internet. The internet is going to make the world much more, egalitarian, much more equal. It's going to give an opportunity for everyone to have a platform and to express their views and ideas equally. Unfortunately, I would say that, moving forward, many of the promises of the internet have been unfulfilled. And by that, I mean that there are so many restrictions on what the internet can and cannot do. And we are seeing these limitations more and more obviously nowadays. For example, when you talk about egalitarianism and you talk about the equal space, is the internet accessible to everyone 24/7 all over the world? Absolutely not. You have the digital gap, the digital divide between the technological haves and the technological have-nots.
But is it enough for countries to do it? Because essentially, I mean, the countries, it's taking it from one type of control to another type of control.
I don't think that the governments are the solution. They can pretty much be part of the problem, so to speak. And therefore, we have to move into thinking, what can ordinary people do? How can they get together? How can citizen journalism be nurtured in a way that can bring about the shaking of these power structures, whether they are political, economic, social, or digital, or technological? Let me just applaud the Palestinian young man who just came up with Upscrolled, which is a platform specifically designed to tell the Palestinian narrative from a Palestinian perspective, free from the controls of hegemonic platforms which are dominated by either Western governments or Western businessmen, or both of them together at the same time. And let's remember that if you are trying to get prepackaged tools and platforms, you will also get prepackaged ideas, and you're going to get prepackaged ideologies. And that is quite dangerous, because you're not going to have your own sovereignty, so to speak, in the digital platform, and you're not going to have your own free expression of identity. So you have to think about coming up not just with new ideas and new thoughts, which is obviously very important, and the content creation is extremely important, but also coming up with your own indigenous platforms that you can also control. I would also say, in the case of the Arab world, the Muslim world, they do have resources. Like, the Gulf countries have the economic resources. There are, the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, they have a lot of manpower, young people. 70% of the population in these countries are under the age of 30. They have a lot of digital, competency and a lot of digital, capabilities. If these different countries bring together their own expertise and their own powers and their own resources, think about what could be done.
Alejandro, I saw you nodding there. She was talking there about what ordinary people can do, and we have touched on that. I want to ask you a broader question. Are we witnessing a shift from state sovereignty and control to more of a power aligning with the tech bros, with these companies that are not elected? How would you describe where we're going?
I think the last year and the geopolitical changes of the world have created an awareness in the general public about the reliance that we have in the big tech. And I think we are having a shift, because now common citizens are very aware of the importance of digital sovereignty from a civil society, from the citizens' perspective. And I think what we are going to see in the upcoming years is going to be a shift in how citizens are having access to these services, and the type of things that we are going to be asking the corporations, and we are going to be asking our governments about our digital infrastructure.
Arthur, I want to ask you, which countries would you say are really the top card holders when it comes to the trade and the control of our digital information globally, as global citizens?
Of course, the United States of America, through the big tech corporations, the big five, but also the government, because I spoke about political architecture. America has what is called non-market regulation, which means that the American corporations are backed by the government or the values of the American people that go out and control. So in many ways, America is quite notorious, particularly with the change in foreign policy now, where Donald Trump, on the one hand, is inward looking, promoting American sovereignty, but at the same time trying to dominate the international community. But also China, because China, technologically and strategically, China is rising and is not only a threat to the EU or to other Western powers like the United States, but China has been striking some deals with African countries and a number of countries across the global south, purportedly as our friend. But we know they are the new colonizers. So for China, it's not just the big corporations like Tencent, Alibaba, and others, but the Chinese government, their doctrine, their philosophy, and their values are based on social control.
It is so fascinating, scary in a way. Certainly our data seems to be very much part of that geopolitical shift. That is all we have time for, unfortunately. Alejandro and Arthur, thank you so much for joining us here on the stream today. And thank you for watching from me and the entire fantastic stream team. I'll see you soon.